I'm going to tell you a story real quick, and I know I tell stories, but you laugh at me every time, Marie. So about transferring deeds. So years ago, pre-slow flips, I used to do a program where I did a lease option for 3 years, and if you paid on time for 3 years, I would put the deed in your name and do all actual owner financing. And so that was all of my houses. That's the way I did it. You lease option for 3 years, pay on time for 3 years. I figured if you pay on time, I trust you at that point, and I'll do actual owner financing and put the deed in your name. So I had this one lady. She was at 1159 18th Street. I actually did some videos out there, and she moved in and paid me like clockwork. On the first of the month, every month she paid like clockwork. 3 years go by, and she sends me a message. It's been 3 years. I want to do a closing now. And I said, okay, but just so you know, you got to pay all the closing costs, both sides, blah, blah. She said, okay, no problem, I'll do it. So we set a closing date. Deed goes in her name. We have closing. We meet there. She's all happy. Everything's good. Never hear from her again. So she never paid again, and she's paid perfect for 3 years, so she never pays. I finally get in touch with her, and she said, I said, well, we haven't received a payment for this month or last month. What's going on? She says, I'm not paying for this house. You sold me a house with no equity. And I'm like, excuse me? Excuse me? She says, I called the guy to give me an equity loan, and he said this house has no equity. And I'm like, oh, well, that's not the way equity works. And I'm talking to her like a child. I'm like, the price you pay, then you pay it down. The difference is your equity. You just bought it last month. There's no equity yet. She's like, I'm not paying for this house. You sold me a house with no equity. In her head, she thought once she owns it, it was a piggy bank. She could just start pulling out cash. So she was playing the long game. Let me pay for 3 years, and then I can start banking all this money. And didn't realize the way it works. You have to have equity in order to get an equity loan. And so I had to foreclose on it. It cost me $5,000 and months. I had to foreclose, and that's when I quickly said, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not transferring them just over. Now, I have transferred some in the way I've done it since. I've transferred a few slow flips since. When somebody's putting an enormous amount of money in or has some kind of distrust for whatever reason, and they ask me if I'll put the deed in their name, I always agree, and I tell them, I'll do it, but I'm going to need an additional $5,000 down. And I tell them why. I said, because if you default, it's going to cost me $5,000 to get you out. And I've had them do it. They'll put up the $5,000, and I'm like, all right, I'll do it. I don't mind if they'll give me an additional $5,000. And they'll do it because they maybe are putting a lot of money into it, and they're scared that I'm going to do something and they'll lose it. You know what I mean? So I'm okay with it as long as they put that extra money down.
So the house with a fire, someone dying, what